If James Franklin says there's a quarterback battle, then there's a quarterback battle. We'll take his word for it. Let's pick every single winner of the head-to-head camp battles for spring practice, starting with the offense in a two-part series.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. My name is Zach Seyko, your host of Locked On Nittany Lions, and I'm joined by, once again, WFAN producer Chris Hess. Chris, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I always love coming on here, talking some Penn State.
Yeah, and we're doing, this is going to be part one of a two-part series as position camp battles. We'll go full offense in this first part, and then in the second part, partially defense, because there's not as many question marks as far as starters. There's important ones. I want to say it's more about quality as opposed to quantity in the case of the offense. That's why the offense gets its own episode. But we're going to merge defense and special teams because there are a lot of question marks when it comes to kicking, punting, punt returner, etc. Honestly, special teams might need its own episode. But I think everybody, the position camp battle, because James Franklin has phrased it this way, Chris, that there is an open competition between Drew Allar and Beau Pribula. So we're going to start with quarterback. We're going to work our way through a tight end, wide receivers, the right tackle, center spot on offense, and then, of course, defense and special teams in the second part. But quarterback here, it's an open competition, according to James Franklin. So he fanned this flame. Now it's out in the open. He also added that Beau Pribula is going to ultimately get more reps at the end of spring practice when all is said and done, and everybody's going to get equal reps. Now, that has to do with creating depth. They don't want Jackson Smolik to come into all of this unprepared. But do you think that Beau Pribula has a legitimate shot at being quarterback one by the time they play West Virginia?
I mean, increased reps for the 2s and 3s, that's huge. That is so huge, and I can't overstate that enough, because how do you build depth? You get guys meaningful reps in meaningful spots. And in my opinion, I think Allar's going to be the starting quarterback. I think he's going to be the starter. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But with Pribula, he brings such an interesting skill set. He's such a dynamic athlete that pays dividends later on. And then maybe you hinted the idea of, do you have special packages for him as well? Because you can't have a 2021 situation all over again. Yes, you're going to have two sophomores waiting in the wings. Essentially, you're going to have Allar starting, and then Pribula's redshirt freshman or sophomore, whatever his classification is. Allar goes down. You have Pribula game ready, not like 2021 where you didn't know who your number 2 was, and it was either Clifford or nobody. And in that case, against Iowa, it was Taquan Roberson, who was just straight up not ready for the moment.
No.
So you can't have that situation happen again. And like I said before, any reps you can get, your backup quarterback, hell, even your third string quarterback, that is so huge.
How close do you think the competition is? I think this is kind of, it obviously reminds me of the last time there was an open quarterback competition, which was 2016 with Trace McSorley and Tommy Stevens. Beau Pribula reminds me a lot of Tommy Stevens in the fact of he's just the better athlete. Tommy Stevens was more athletic than Trace McSorley. Both guys could run the football, as you saw, but because Stevens was bigger, Stevens had greater strides, longer strides with his legs and his size, and he could bulldoze through people. Trace McSorley ultimately had that it factor. But the difference in that quarterback battle was the fact that Trace McSorley could read defenses and Tommy Stevens just wasn't at that same level. I think what I gathered was that Beau Pribula ultimately did rise up the depth chart. Now, I know he didn't come in any live action throughout the 2022 season. But from what I gathered in practice, he started to become silently the 3, that he and Christian Veilleux were splitting third team reps. And that's ultimately why Christian Veilleux had transferred, because he had lost his spot of the 2. He was splitting the 3, and it made sense for him to find a new home. So Beau Pribula is he as good as advertised? Is this a close battle? Or again, I sit back and I say, Drew Allar is going to be the starter because Penn State made such a concerted effort to get him on the football field. No other program, I think, in history. Maybe there's like a D2 or D3 program that had the guy waiting in the wings. But what other Power 5 conference team did you ever see take a freshman quarterback like this? Maybe Georgia with Justin Fields, but that was to keep him happy. Michigan with JJ McCarthy. Penn State wasn't trying to keep Drew Allar happy. They were trying to prepare him for what's ahead, life after Sean Clifford.
I don't think Georgia was really in that case of playing Justin Fields to keep him around, because he got such limited game action that Kirby Smart was riding with Jake Fromm through thick and thin. That regardless of how Fromm was going to perform, he was no doubt going to be the guy. And Justin Fields was waiting in the wings. He had the short fuse and set him out. Forget it. And I think what this is real, Drew Allar is the now. Beau Pribula is the later. You have your short-term investment. You're throwing all of the eggs into the Drew Allar basket, and rightfully so. Highest-rated quarterback they've gotten since Christian Hackenberg, and you're hoping that he can get you over the hump. Do I think he has the ability to? Absolutely. Will it actually happen? We're going to find out starting on September 2nd if that happens. But I think Beau Pribula, as a long-term investment, keep him around. Because if Allar is as good as advertised, in all likelihood, Allar will play the 2 years and be gone to the NFL. In a perfect world, that's what happens. And Pribula is waiting in the wings. You're getting him in the game in those package situations similar to a Tommy Stevens. But if Pribula, who's a fantastic athlete, performs really well on top of that, you have a good problem to have.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Drew Allar as the number one starter. Again, not only the high school pedigree, but that doesn't matter anymore. Nobody cares what you did in high school the second you step onto college campus. Same thing with the NFL. Whatever you did in college, that's old news when you show up to camp day one, when you show up to rookie camp. For Penn State, they would have made a strategic effort to have both Drew Allar and Beau Pribula get reps in 2022. Had that been the case of, hey, Pribula is gaining some ground. And there's no doubt that he's gaining ground as far as respect goes, that they can trust him, that if Drew Allar, for whatever reason, cannot be on the football field as QB1, they believe that Beau Pribula can run the offense differently, but to the same effect. So I'm in the boat of I'm buying Drew Allar as the starter. I think it's all smoke and mirrors just to make sure that a fire is underneath of Drew Allar so he doesn't sit back and say, I'm QB1. I don't need to, work as hard, because then that creates a whole mess of problems, this entitlement. So I think it's all locker room talk and coach speak. But I do legitimately think that we are going to see Beau Pribula used as that lion once again, and call it, basically instead of Tommy Stevens, it is now Beau Pribula.
100%. I like what they've been able to do with quarterback competition. And I think James Franklin realized that after the whole Iowa debacle and Illinois debacle, we can't have this happen again. It was never a problem. And I don't think it's something that really crossed the staff's mind in those first couple of years, because you didn't think about it as much. You knew it was a possibility, but it's like, all right, we'll be fine. And then when it wasn't fine, it was catastrophic of epic proportions, or a catastrophe of epic proportions. And you're like, okay, we can't have this happen again. Because if it happens, that is completely on us.
It is a Locked On Nittany Lions. Let's take a quick timeout, but after a word from our sponsor, we're going to talk about the pass catchers and then the offensive line, as this is camp battles for spring practices, where we think the Nittany Lions will ultimately have on the depth chart when all said and done. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. Plus, FanDuel lets you even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Anything spread, money line, total, points, rebounds, assists, and so many other exclusive bets like 2x3, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Nittany Lions. My name is Zach Seyko. He is Chris Hess. And thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. Plus, you get to hear from big name experts, insiders, players, and coaches. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, Isaac Shade and Annie Patton do an incredible job over there. It's March Madness. Madness is in full effect. Fairleigh Dickinson and Princeton. I mean, my goodness. But Chris, Penn State's offense does have some question marks, and particularly because they had to go into the transfer portal to get some additional help between Malik McLean and Dante Cephas, who's still not on campus yet, but he's going to transfer in soon. So there's a lot of open spot. I think wide receivers completely open. Keandre Lambert-Smith, I know he returns, but let's begin with the slot. Since Parker, they didn't bring in necessarily a true slot receiver now. And that's why I say Keandre Lambert is safe in the fact that he's going to be a starter, but we don't know where he's going to be. The media has said, well, let's move him to the Y. Let's move him to the slot. I think he could still hypothetically start at the Z, but beginning with the slot position, I think that Liam Clifford has a really good shot at being the starting slot receiver, if people can believe that. I think that I've heard a lot of good things of just what he's done in the offseason. He got additional reps down the stretch of the season. Like, they couldn't keep him off the field. So I think we could see a scenario. This is just, how about we group them all together, right? I'm starting specifically with the slot, but I can see a starting group of Keandre Lambert-Smith as the Z, Dante Cephas as the X, and Liam Clifford as the Y in the slot. What do you say?
I'd say that's fair. I'd say that's a very fair assumption. Or if you're going to have Lambert-Smith in the slot, Cephas in the X, and then Clifford in the Z, or is it the Z, excuse me. Yeah, the W, X, and Z.
Yeah.
So you have Cephas in the X, maybe Harrison Wallace in the Z, and then Lambert-Smith in the slot, and you have Clifford right behind him. The good thing about this receiving group is they're all talented in their own way. It's just, how are they going to fit into those pieces of the puzzle? You can interchange them. You can place them wherever. Guys are obviously better in certain spots. But this is a good problem to have, because I think there's going to be a lot of guys rotating in and out. And I think another sleeper, excuse me, in that room is Caden Saunders.
Yeah.
You got to find a spot for him, because you can't teach that speed. His speed, you cannot teach. Like, that's 4.3 burner track speed he has, and you got to keep him on the field in some capacity. But I don't know. It's a tough thing to pick out right now, just because guys can be placed anywhere and find success. So, I mean, I think the three would probably be Liam Clifford, Keandre Lambert-Smith, and Dante Cephas for now, but that's all a fluid situation.
I could see a situation where it's Dante Cephas that's why they brought him in, and they were targeting him heavily. I think Malik McLean was insurance. What do you think about Malik McLean's chances being a starter? Because he's 6'4". He's going, and honestly, as fun as it is to say who's going to be the starter, who's going to win the camp battle, in reality, especially when it comes to wide receiver and defensive line, Penn State rotates guys in a lot. Okay. There's going to be your starting three, the guys that you're going to have in crunch time. But at the end of the day, snap counts matter. And Malik McLean might not be the first guy on the field, but he very well could be the last. And he could see more reps at the end of the day, especially if Penn State frequently gets into the red zone, which I think they will with this offense.
McLean's an intriguing and interesting player. He's got long arms, long legs, 6'4", big catch radius. And I caught a couple of his highlights when it was confirmed that he was transferring to Penn State, that a couple of his highlights got posted on Twitter. And those 50-50 balls inside the 20, that's all him. That's his bread and butter. He's not your prototypical downfield, okay, we need to take a shot here. That's likely your Cephas or your Lambert-Smith that if you need a 75-yard play and you want to score immediately, that's your guy. In anything less than 20 yards, McLean should be your guy, just because he's so much bigger than everybody else. You get him matched up against a 5'11" or 6-foot corner.
Right.
He jumps out of the stadium too. And any ball, just let him high point the ball. That's his big thing. Or if you need a back shoulder play on a third down, he's your guy.
Let's move to the tight end. Not necessarily Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren. I think they're going to be the starting tight ends. There's no doubt. But we know from James Franklin to open up spring practice that there's some bumps and bruises, it seems to be. So they were banged up. So now it makes sense why Khalil Dinkins, Jerry Cross, and others were winning consistently the winter workout warrior from Ty Howell at the tight end position. So Chris, I'm not looking for as much analysis here at the third string tight end spot, but do you think it's Khalil Dinkins? Do you think it's going to be Jerry Cross because he was a highly touted 4-star and he stuck around? I figured he was going to transfer, be in the portal, but he stayed. And then because more importantly, you have these two incredible freshmen coming in Joey Schlaffer and Andrew Raplia. So what say you at the third tight end spot?
Personally, I feel like you can't go wrong with either one. Any of them. It doesn't matter. Yep. This is the position group that I am just not worried about whatsoever. You could put Khalil Dinkins out there as your number one, for example, and there is no problem with that whatsoever. He's a great athlete. And then Jerry Cross, too, when he gets healthy, he's got a redshirt year under his belt, too, able to grow a little bit, put on a little bit of weight. It's all beneficial. That the biggest concern for me is just keeping this tight end room healthy. Because when they're healthy, they're a top unit in the country. And if they're not, they're still really good, but there's concern. Just, I'm not going to say who it is. You couldn't go wrong with either of the guys, Dinkins or any of the freshmen or Jerry Cross as your number 3. Biggest thing is just keep them healthy. That's it.
I'm going to roll with Khalil Dinkins just to be kind of, direct with it. I like that Jerry Cross is still showing potential, but Khalil Dinkins, to see him come in with that next group, okay, after Theo Johnson, Tyler Warren, whenever those guys were off the field last year because of injuries in the 2022 regular season, Khalil Dinkins, I can't see him falling behind on the depth chart, especially as he saw significant reps from a reserve. He wasn't a focal point getting him rotated into the offense. He was a reserve. The fact that he saw as many reps, I think it's definitely something that he's going to build upon. And for him to win, even with Johnson and Moore not available at winter workouts, he won boom, 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 back to back to back. So that's good news for the Nittany Lions as far as building depth. And then to see the positive reports that Jerry Cross is bigger, faster, stronger, more mentally tough. And it's not, he's falling out of the program. He's there as well. He's competing. So it's just all good news all around. And then highly touted recruits coming in. So I think the tight end room is one of the strongest for Penn State. But it is important if Johnson and Warren are not available to go in the regular season because they've had some injury problems, who is that next man up? And I feel good about Khalil Dinkins and Jerry Cross if they need to come in. It is Locked On Nittany Lions. Let's take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk the two position battles at center and right tackle. See if Drew Shelton can swing over now that Olu Fashion is back and take that job from Caedan Wallace. It is Locked On Nittany Lions. Final segment of Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm Zach Seyko, joined by Chris Hess. And Chris, the center and the right tackle spots are up for grabs again, according to James Franklin. I don't even know that the guard positions are safe, but when you return starters Landon Tangwall and Sal Wormley, they're not as up for grabs, if you will. I just like the guys that are behind them, be it JB Nelson or Vanga Ioane. I think Vanga Ioane eventually is going to start to take into some snap counts. But we're talking center and right tackle real quick as we finish up part 1 of a part 2 series of these spring camp battles. And center, let's start there because they start with the football. They are always first to touch the football. I don't think Hunter Nourzad's a lock to start at center. That's just my opinion. I think that Nick Dawkins is really good. He was injured last year, had to miss the remainder of the regular season. So that paused his progress, but that's his position. I look at someone like Hunter Nourzad, who played tackle at Cornell for years, switched over to guard, and then played a little bit of center and some garbage time and not even that many reps. It was always Juice Scruggs and mainly because Nick Dawkins was hurt at that point in time, but Hunter Nourzad was always a rotational guard. So he's the veteran. He's been doing this for 6 years. He's incredibly intelligent. That's what you want from your center. But because it's Nick Dawkins' natural position, and if now I'm banking on that he's recovered fully from this injury, whatever it is, I'm going to take that Nick Dawkins is going to be basically the 1A, and that him and Nourzad are going to rotate. That's my pick.
That won't surprise me. I like both of them a lot. Dawkins has a lot of potential in him. The bugaboo is just stay healthy. He's got all the talent in the world. He's getting better when he's actually on the field and when he's healthy. But he hasn't been able to stay healthy. If he could just get over that injury hump, potential is through the roof. And I like both of them a lot. I think it's going to be Nourzad to start just because he is the veteran. He's the sixth-year guy. But like a lot of things on the offensive line, they rotate in legs too. They keep that unit, the starting unit, consistent.
Sure.
But they also get other guys behind them that get reps in there as well. Like Venga Ione in the second half of games. Like the game wasn't even really out of reach yet, but he's getting meaningful reps at the guard position.
Mm-hmm.
And he might be my favorite offensive lineman on that team just because of the sheer athleticism, how big, how mean, how physical, and just how nasty the guy plays. Like if he's coming down the tracks at you, oh man. And he's pushing 350, maybe 360, but doesn't look the part.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
James said 369. He said that Venga Ioane is going to be the best 369 pounds that you're ever going to see. So, and that was unprovoked. Nobody asked about Venga. Everybody, James Franklin just casually dropped that in there. So that's saying something. And they said that Sal Wormley might get some reps at center as well. So the fact that there's all these considerations and that they would entertain this just makes me wonder about the center position as for it being as wide open as it is. And then we'll finish this part one up with right tackle, and then defense is going to be in part two. So we'll talk about D-line, linebackers, secondary, and include special teams in that too. At right tackle, Drew Shelton's going to slide over from left tackle to right. He's going to be the backup left tackle, but when you have a top 5 NFL draft pick coming back, he's the starter. There's no question about it. He's healthy, according to James Franklin. But Caedan Wallace's position feels like it's never been safe since he's been the starter the past 3 seasons. This is going into his 3rd season as the starter, and it's still not safe. They were looking in the transfer portal. It makes you wonder again, why are they entertaining this? So is Drew Shelton the dark horse candidate to start at right tackle?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's crazy to think that when Fashanu went down last year, Drew Shelton came on the field. And quite honestly,
played very
I didn't see much of a drop-off.
No.
I did not see much of a drop-off. I have been very critical of this offensive line, as you know, and as a lot of other Penn State fans, though, they have a right to be critical with the offensive line. But in the second half of the season, when Drew Shelton slid over to left tackle, I was beyond impressed with how Drew Shelton conducted himself, played, and just looked so comfortable as a true freshman playing in the Big Ten. Granted, the opponents in the second half of the season weren't the best, but he's playing Big Ten football as a freshman and maybe allowed 1 sack the remainder of the season, was great down the stretch, and helped spring Singleton's touchdown run in the Rose Bowl. It started with him. And you can't, he's almost 300 pounds, might be north of that, but he's float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. He's so light on his feet. He gets up to the second level nicely. His punch is explosive. And again, when the train's rolling down the tracks, get out of the way, because he'll take on 2 guys at once and bulldoze both of them. You can't teach that.
I can't help but buy into that as well. I want to say Caedan Wallace because 5th season, it's his 3rd year being a starter. He is athletic. He actually had quietly a really good Rose Bowl game as well.
No, he did.
But the fact that Drew Shelton, they could have brought Olu Fashanu back. I think Olu Fashanu wasn't 100%, but they felt comfortable enough with Drew Shelton, the true freshman, to start the remainder of the season. And that's a testament to Shelton. So I think that's going to carry over now. He does that. Left and right tackle are very different. So he's going to have a little bit of a learning curve, but I feel like they've kind of been progressively working on this. So, oh man, I am going to buy into Drew Shelton being the 1A right tackle and Caedan Wallace being the 1B. And then just kind of the day one, you're not really going to have a true starter. You're going to see them both. And then I think through non-conference play, when you get to Big Ten play, you'll figure out who's going to be the starter. But those first 4 games, I don't think we'll know until week 4 or 5. If it's Wallace or if it's Shelton. That's how close it is. But I'll go Shelton.
I'll go Shelton as well. It's going to be a fun battle because those 2 guys compete, and they're both great players. But I don't know. Let's settle it on the field.
That's going to conclude part 1 of spring camp battles for the Penn State football team. Again, he's Chris Hess. I'm Zach Seyko. Chris, where can people keep up with your work? And we're going to have you back here for the defensive preview as well.
So you can follow me on Twitter at ChrisHess22. And if you want to stay up to date with my personal life, because personally, I think I do fun stuff, my Instagram is at Christopher_Hess22.
All right, Chris, thanks for the time as always. And thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch. Make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton, everything you need to know about college basketball with March Madness. You can check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Chris, I'm looking forward to the defensive camp battles as well. Everyone be on the lookout for that. And Chris, again, I always appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. And let's have a good time doing part 2.